Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, welcome to a new episode of Ilanomics. The economy has begun to reopen, and the lockdown is in its last stage. Lockdown 4.0 is ending. There is talk of a lockdown 5.0, but we don't know the shape of that lockdown, and obviously the restrictions will be very, very minimal in this lockdown, even if there is one. At the same time, the number of infections are rising, the number of COVID infections are rising. So this is a new challenge because the government has to manage both the economy and the rising infections. How does one go about tackling it? And what are the challenges the government faces? Professor Ila Patnaik will analyze this for us. Ila, this it's a conundrum. You have rising infections on one hand, and you have the economy much open than it was at the beginning of the lockdown. How do we square the two?
I think it's going to be a huge challenge. It's going to be a huge challenge for policymakers. And this time, the challenge is going to be at every level of government. Because when the lockdown was imposed, it was a central government action. Now, as the lockdown is being opened up, every locality, every district, every RWA, every state is looking at what can it do, how can it work safely. So how can it ensure safety of its workers, safety of its people, as well as open up the economy, resume activity. And this is going to mean hundreds of decisions are going to be taken at every level. These decisions are going to be changed every day because as the situation evolves, it's a very dynamic situation. First, we don't know a lot about the virus and the spread of the virus, the cures, the even look at how norms about masks change. Norms have been introduced which were not there earlier, such as don't wear them to everybody should wear. Well, we're learning and learning every day. So I think just the very fact of keeping up with all the rules, all the changes is going to be a huge task and is going to pose a huge challenge to the economy.
But you have, in your piece, Ila, argued that we are now more than 50 days into the lockdown. There is a lot of data, not just about the lockdown, but also about infections, the sections of the population, the sections of the country that are infected. So doesn't that, all that data that India has right now make it easy for, policymakers?
Yes, but that data has to be analyzed. It has to be given to researchers. So when we look at the thousands of papers that have come on that has research on the disease, on the virus, on its spread, who gets it, age profiles, comorbidities, etc. Most of them are based either on Wuhan or on Italy or on New York. Authorities that have released data to researchers, and which is why that data has been analyzed and specifically that population has been understood. So if in one population the people above 65 are more affected, then maybe in India the number is different. So the question really is, can researchers have that data to analyze it? Of course, keeping all data privacy issues in mind and addressing those, but that data does need to be available to Indian researchers who can analyze it, or researchers across the world actually, because many researchers are analyzing data of different countries. So at least to us, where our policy making in the coming, maybe in the coming 2 years, because this seems to be now a long innings that has to be played. Mm-hmm. And that data should be analyzed so that decisions that are taken, policy measures that are taken, are based on data that is relevant for us. Mm-hmm. What gives us more immunity, if anything? Does the history of my disease make me less or more immune? Mm-hmm. Of my previous illnesses, of the inoculations I might have had? Say, we've talked about vaccines. So there are some studies that are being done, but very few. And certainly the data, there are a lot of researchers now saying that if we want to study India better and form policies, then can we please have a look at the data for India for patients who tested positive, who tested negative, recovery rates, death rates, profiles of patients, and so on.
Uh, you mentioned Arogya Setu in your column this week, Ila, and it is an advantage, right? Because Arogya Setu has a lot of information about people in different parts of the country, their movement, their symptoms, how they are behaving. Can you elaborate on that? How Arogya Setu is could actually help India?
So Arogya Setu is a contact tracing apps, and like other countries such as South Korea, UK, who have developed contact tracing apps, it really tries to say, have you been in contact with somebody who has now tested positive, and therefore you may be at risk. There were initially, the government tried to say that it should be mandatory. There were a lot of concerns raised for it. But now, in a welcome move, the source code of Arogya Setu has been made open. That means that if there were allegations that it's going to actually try and, when you install it on your phone, it's going to try and do many other things, go read your email, go read your WhatsApp messages, and so on. So those concerns can be addressed because you can look at what does this do. There are two more things. One, a bug bounty has been announced. So if you can find a bug in the app, you get a prize because that helps to improve the app. And second, there are people who are saying that now let us have the source code for what is at the server end as well, so that we know that at the server, you're not collecting information that may be used for any other kind of surveillance. So there were issues related to that. And, I think a very positive first step has been taken by saying, okay, now, if this is your criticism, we are making our Arogya Setu source code open and available for you to look at. It's on GitHub, so developers, hackers, people can go and look at it. The other issue is that we don't really have a data privacy law. I think the law was tabled in Parliament, went to a standing committee, comments were invited, and that has to go through. So you need to have a good data privacy law, legal framework in place, so that if there is a breach, then a breach doesn't happen really, and if there is one, then that's illegal. So that's again something that needs to be addressed, and that's the next step. But looking at the response, I think that the government is well aware of this, and you found Union Minister Hardeep Puri say that if, we are not making it mandatory for air travelers. Now let's see what happens later. But certainly it's an attempt to say that, look, we want you to be safe. Can we try and come up with a contact tracing app to help us do this? One could argue that contact tracing has been done by Kerala without an app. They've used some GPS and some, very, very human in resources to do contact tracing. It can be done. But if an app helps, and if we can ensure data privacy, and if we can ensure that it doesn't get hacked, then that will help as well.
There is this need for data and making policy based on data, and on the other hand, we just talked about the multiplicity of authorities and the multiplicity of rules. So when you have data telling you different things about different places, is it possible to have common rules, Ila?
So the rules need not be common. So it could be that the situation in one place is different from the situation in another place. The state capacity very often is very different. So Kerala might have liquor being sold first booked online, then 5 people turning up, whereas in another state it may be very different. So both the situation on the ground is different and the state capacity is different. So it doesn't have to be that the rules have to be common. I think what we do need to understand is that the rules have to be communicated to people. They may be different, but people should know what the rules are, so that if they're going to hire people, start production, they should know if they can deliver to a particular state, or will they be stopped at the border, if rules of essential, non-essentials will change every day, if rules of travel will change every day. Delhi borders are shut, but there are some things considered essential. It is easy. Look at the example of travelers. So, the very first day when air travel opened up, rules, so many people had flight cancellations because state governments had uh, chosen not to allow those flights, and for various other reasons. So I think the big challenge is going to be that, at least, if we, next few months till we sort it out, how are we going to at least be able to communicate these different and changing rules to people, so that they can plan businesses, they can plan their work, they can plan their travel? How should they not be harassed? How should an online market platform be able to sell across the country, knowing where it can deliver and where its delivery boys will get beaten up if they try to enter? So that's going to be a big challenge, and it should, not lead to harassment, not lead to business difficulties. Just one more point. There is a lot of research Nick Bloom and his co-authors have done, and some other people have done, where they find that greater uncertainty reduces economic growth and investment and employment. So policy uncertainty, I mean, now, of course, policy uncertainty has gone through the roof with COVID, and they look at that in a few ways. In one of their NBER working papers, which has come out recently, and find that for the US, never before, it is comparable to the policy uncertainty we have now is comparable to 1929 to 33. Much more uncertainty than we had in the financial crisis. And that kind of policy uncertainty is actually a huge barrier for people to start thinking that they can invest, they can plan, they can start businesses. So we really, this is not a small problem. It's not just about I've inconvenienced a person here and a person there, but it's about the entire economy and how that's going to get affected unless we find ways to do, maybe consultations, maybe common platforms, find ways of communicating, do that effectively. And that will be a huge challenge, I think.
We've talked about uncertainty even in many of the reports we've done and columns and analysis, Ila. And one of the points that have been raised frequently is how the central government has left a lot of decision making to the states. And the states in turn have left it to district authorities, and the district authorities have in turn left it to RWAs. So how does one claw back? How do you take back that multiplicity of authorities and rules, and how do you go back to saying let's have some kind of uniformity?
No, I don't think I'm arguing for either centralization or uniformity. What I'm arguing for is communication, consultation, communication, coordination, cooperation, so that people know what to do. It is not necessary that the government should actually not claw back, because you've seen how difficult it is when the same rules, one size fits all, doesn't work. So the same rule cannot be applied to everybody. There can be differences in rules. So look at quarantine rules. When you land in one state, you have to stay at home for 7 days, in another state for 14 days, in a third state not at all, and so on. So quarantine rules are different, and we have a federal structure. I'm not proposing that the central government should claw it all back, but can we have it, if possible? I mean, so do consultations, if possible, uniform when they can be, but certainly not necessarily so. It might be that ground conditions are very different, and health systems are very different across states. but you do need to be able to communicate to people that this is. So I don't know, maybe a central repository, maybe one platform. I should be able to go and check, can I enter such and such a district? And there are over 700 districts. If each district administration has a different set of rules, it's going to be very hard. So increasingly, can we have commonality across those? So it may be that mine is different from yours, but instead of 700, maybe there are 7 ways in which things can be done, and it can be communicated to people. I just feel that unless we do that, uh, there could be a lot of arbitrary power, especially at the lower levels of government, whether it's government and even non-government. Today you find RWAs, vice chancellors, principals, each person who has the power and responsibility to take care of people, to take care of their safety, their well-being, as well as bring them back to work, is now trying to form a set of rules. And these could be quite arbitrary. A curfew from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. One can barely step out in Delhi at 7 p.m. It's so hot. And, trying to go shopping at 4 or 5 p.m. can give you a heat stroke. So rules can be different, and they can be suitable to local conditions. It's not that there are any easy answers, but I think this is going to be a big challenge that we are likely to face. Different levels of rule making, and those will keep changing because of the way the virus might spread.
Different challenges and different rules, but end the uncertainty and communicate better. That could probably help make things a little more easy for the economy and, of course, for the people. That's the word from us here at Ilanomics this week. We will be back with you again next week, and there could be lockdown 5.0, or the restrictions may be much, much lesser, and we will tell you what that means again next week. Please do keep watching us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.